Hello, folks. This is Jacob Harkey. It is February 20th, 2024, and I wanted to pop on and give some updates and chat about a few different issues that I think are important. So, those of you who have been following along over the last half a week, I guess, at this point, may be aware of a lot of what's going on with our friend Scotty, aka Defender of Ants, or DOA. For those who are unfamiliar, just to give a brief recap of what has generally happened with regard to that situation, a handful of protesters were protesting outside of the restaurant La Poubelle in Hollywood on Friday of last week. A handful of protesters were arrested. Danny and LA Cam were released the following morning, and DOA is still in jail. Now, I've given a handful of updates about this situation, and other creators have done the same. You may have seen Aaron Smith-Levin from Growing Up in Scientology chatting about this, as well as Laura FM, among many others. I visited DOA in jail yesterday, and I gave an update shortly thereafter. There's a few things that I have received conflicting information about. So I apologize to everybody who thought that his court hearing was supposed to be today. That is what I heard when I called the number that I was instructed to call yesterday at the jail. This is something that has been consistently happening when trying to get information from the LAPD. Is I'll receive a phone number to call. I might call that number. They might direct me to another number. So a couple of things that I have had conflicting information that I've received about have included his van and whether or not we would be able to tow it. Initially, when Laura and I first asked about that at the LAPD Wilcox station, we wanted to get his consent to be allowed to move it. And we were told that it is being considered evidence in his case, so we won't be allowed to do that. Well, then, when I tried to inquire about that again yesterday, I wasn't told anything about it being used as evidence in his case, and it sounded, based on talking to the lot where it's being held, like as soon as he gets out, he can come and get it. Well, I tried to get his consent, but by going back to the jail and asking about that, and they told me that we don't do that at this jail. So that's one thing, the van, that I wasn't able to get accurate updates about, or that I got conflicting information about. The other thing is, of course, about his court date. I was told yesterday when I called the number that I was instructed to call, asking about details for his court date, they told me that it would be tomorrow, meaning today. Yesterday, they said tomorrow. Now, they didn't say February 20th. They said tomorrow, but it was February 19th when they said that. So I don't know if that was a mistake on the other line, or if the date really was moved up to today and then moved back. I don't know. But to those who showed up to court this morning, I know Laura was there. I believe Jessica Palmadessa was also there. I'm sorry that you went out all that way to learn that that the hearing actually was not happening today. But I appreciate those of you who are making an effort to show up for Scotty. And I've got Scotty's links in the description of this video, as well as Danny's links and Cam's links for those of you who want to show them your support. I'm sure that they would appreciate it. Now, today, Laura visited DOA in jail. I was able to visit him yesterday. Laura visited him today. He only gets one visitor per day and only 15 minutes. Later today, both Laura and I will be speaking to Natalie Webster of Scientology Life Without a Cult to have a chat and give the updates that we have. So we'll get more into that later. A couple of other things that I wanted to address really quickly. Some folks have reached out to me since the live that I did yesterday about Josiah. I will say right off the bat that I do not know Josiah very well at all, but I've received some messages informing me of incidents that I was not aware of before, involving altercations between him and other protesters. The main thing that I want to get at here, the information that I was presenting yesterday, I wanted to share the messages that DOA wanted me to get out there. And the main thing that he wanted me to get out there is that he's not too concerned about himself. He worries more about Josiah. I thought it was very selfless of him, that was his main concern, was his concern for others. And that was the main thing that he wanted me to get out there. Now, according to DOA, Josiah told him that he was criminally charged on making criminal threats against Patrick Perry. I've done a little bit of digging to try to verify that, and I was able to find that he is still being held at the Hollywood jail on Wilcox, and that he, after making a phone call, I found that his charge was involving criminal threats. So I asked, are you able to give me any more information about who he made the criminal threats against? And the officer I was speaking to said, I can't, but I can give you the phone numbers of the detectives. You can call them and see what information they're able to give you. So I called the number that they gave me, and I had many different options that I was given about which branch of detectives I wanted to talk to and which extension I could dial. I wasn't sure, and it said, if you're unsure about which branch of detectives would be overseeing the case that you're asking about, press 8 and leave a message, and a detective will get back to you. So I did. I pressed 8. I left a message, and nobody has gotten back to me yet. So I can confirm that Josiah was charged on making criminal threats. What I don't know for sure is whether those were indeed threats against Patrick Perry. So those are just a couple of quick updates that I wanted to share about DOA. And like I said, I will be chatting more later today with Laura, who visited him today in jail, as well as Natalie Webster. Now, if you see the title of this video and the description of this video, there's another topic that I want to chat about today. I want to chat a little bit about Julian Assange and what's happening with him this week. Now, I've had some hesitation and some back and forth in my own head over the last day or so about if I wanted to really get into this topic right now. Because with everything going on with DOA, with the protesters, with the LAPD, I figured maybe it would make sense to wait until another time and wait a few days and cover this then. But the reality is there's some big news that's going on right now. And if you have seen some of the streams that I've done over the last week or so, there have been a couple of times where I've raised the question of activism versus journalism. And is there a way to be a journalist and report on news while also presenting your opinion? Is there an ethical way to do that? It's something that I've wondered a lot about over the last few days, really over the last few months, actually. But over the last week or so, I've continued to have that kind of conversation raised to the forefront of my mind a little bit more. And I think that the Julian Assange case that's currently going on is very relevant to that discussion and to questions about freedom of the press. And DOA himself is a strong advocate of freedom of speech. He is an avid protester. He protests all kinds of different issues. He regularly protests against instances of corruption and abuse. And so this is something that I want to take a moment to chat about. So for those who are unfamiliar with who Julian Assange is, I want to go ahead and start by reading a little bit of his Wikipedia page. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is Julian Assange's Wikipedia page here. And I know Wikipedia sometimes gets a bad rap for not having accurate information because all of the information on here can be edited by anybody. I've reviewed this. I've been reviewing this today, and I know that many sources are cited in the footnotes and in the references. All the sources of the information that appears in here can be accessed, and all of the cases that have involved Julian Assange, there are a lot to get into, and really, the reality is I will likely only scratch the surface of a lot of the topics that I want to talk about today, but I think that as somebody who is interested in journalism, who is interested in activism, and sees the importance of freedom of speech and freedom of the press and the freedom to criticize those who are in positions of authority, those who are in the government or in law enforcement. I think that all of these are things that it's important for citizens to be able to do. And I understand that while getting into political topics, there can certainly be some disagreement. And personally, I'm still fairly new to streaming at all and having these forms of public conversations. I'm very happy to see the way that the community of you all that are in the chat has grown over the last couple of weeks. I understand if some of you in the chat, even if we agree on issues like Scientology and revoking Scientology's tax exempt status and exposing the corruption between Scientology and the LAPD, you might disagree with me on other issues, and that's fine. But I will kindly ask that you are respectful in the chat as we're getting into this. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at Julian Assange. Julian Paul Assange is an Australian editor, publisher, and activist who founded WikiLeaks in 2006. He came to wide international attention in 2010 when WikiLeaks published a series of leaks from U.S. Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning, footage of a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad, U.S. military logs from the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and U.S. diplomatic cables. Assange has won multiple awards for publishing and journalism. I'm not going to read everything that appears in here. I want to focus on what I think is important to understand the context for what's happening today and tomorrow. In November 2010, Sweden issued a European arrest warrant for Assange for questioning in a Swedish investigation. After losing his appeal against the warrant, he breached bail and took refuge in the Embassy of Ecuador in London in June 2012. He was granted asylum by Ecuador in August of 2012 on the grounds of political persecution and fears he might be extradited to the United States. He stood for the Australian Senate in 2013 and launched the WikiLeaks party, but failed to win a seat. Swedish prosecutors dropped the investigation in 2019. On the 11th of April 2019, Assange's asylum was withdrawn following a series of disputes with Ecuadorian authorities. The police were invited into the embassy and he was arrested. He was found guilty of breaching the Bail Act and sentenced to 50 weeks in prison. The US government unsealed an indictment charging Assange with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion related to the leaks provided by Manning. And of course, that's referring back to the leaks that were made in 2010 by US Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning. That's the footage of the US airstrike in Baghdad, US military logs from the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and US diplomatic cables. In May of 2019 and June of 2020, the US government unsealed new indictments against Assange, charging him with violating the Espionage Act of 1917 and alleging he had conspired with hackers. Assange has been confined in HM Prison Belmarsh in London since April of 2019, as the United States government's extradition effort is contested in the British courts. So that's an overview of who Julian Assange is and what he's known for. Thanks to former U.S. Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange was able to publish on his site WikiLeaks evidence of the U.S. airstrike in Baghdad, U.S. military logs from wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the U.S. diplomatic cables. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and talk about, what we saw at the end there is that the United States government is aiming to extradite him from the United Kingdom. So what I want to look at next, I want to look at what's happening right now as those efforts are going on in the UK. Now, I have a handful of tabs open here. I want to make sure that I'm opening up the right one. I will point out that in the description of this video, I included a link which was posted by the New York Times around the time that those leaks were made, to a video called Collateral Murder. And this video is about 39 minutes long, and it's one of those videos that was leaked. Now, for the purposes of time as well as content, I'm not going to be showing that video right now, but if you want to watch it, and I would encourage you to check it out if you want to get a deeper understanding of what I'm talking about right now, you can look at one of the links in the description in order to view that. Now, what I want to look at next, I want to look at an open letter that was published in 2022, November of 2022, by the New York Times and some other media outlets. So I'm going to share my screen again. In just a moment. Sorry, you all. I'm still getting used to StreamYard and how I can go about all this. All right, here we go. So, like I said, this is from November 28th, 2022, and it's titled An Open Letter from Editors and Publishers. Publishing is not a crime. The US government should end its prosecution of Julian Assange for publishing secrets. 12 years ago, on November 28th, 2010, our 5 international media outlets, the New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, El País, and Der Spiegel, published a series of revelations in cooperation with WikiLeaks that made the headlines around the globe. Cablegate, a set of 251,000 confidential cables from the US State Department, disclosed corruption, diplomatic scandals, and spy affairs on an international scale. In the words of the New York Times, the documents told the unvarnished story of how the government makes its biggest decisions, the decisions that cost the country most heavily in lives and money. Even now, in 2022, journalists and historians continue to publish new revelations using the unique trove of documents. For Julian Assange, publisher of WikiLeaks, the publication of Cablegate and several other related leaks had the most severe consequences. On April 11, 2019, Assange was arrested in London on a US arrest warrant and has now been held for 3.5 years in a high-security British prison, usually used for terrorists and members of organized crime groups. He faces extradition to the United States and a sentence of up to 175 years in an American maximum security prison. Really quick, just to point out, it says has now been held there for 3.5 years. Remember, this is from November of 22, so it's really closer to 5 years now. This group of editors and publishers, all of whom had worked with Assange, felt the need to publicly criticize his conduct in 2011 when unredacted copies of the cables were released, and some of us are concerned about the allegations in the indictment that he attempted to aid in computer intrusion of a classified database. But we come together now to express our grave concerns about the continued prosecution of Julian Assange for obtaining and publishing classified materials. The Obama-Biden administration, in office during the WikiLeaks publication in 2010, refrained from indicting Assange, explaining that they would have had to indict journalists from major news outlets too. Their position placed a premium on press freedom, despite its uncomfortable consequences. Under Donald Trump, however, the position changed. The DOJ relied on an old law, the Espionage Act of 1917, designed to prosecute potential spies during World War I, which has never been used to prosecute a publisher or broadcaster. Really quick, one thing that I want to point out before I go on, like this says, the leaks were made in 2010 when Barack Obama was president, and it was also under Obama's administration that the sentence of Chelsea Manning, the former U.S. Army intelligence correspondent, was sentenced to, I believe it was 35 years in prison. I can confirm that before I'm done with the video. Obama commuted her sentence, and she was released, I want to say that it was 2016 or 2017. My apologies for not having that right in front of me. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. But as this says, the Espionage Act has never been used to prosecute a publisher or broadcaster before. This indictment sets a dangerous precedent, and it threatens to undermine America's First Amendment and the freedom of the press. Holding governments accountable is part of the core mission of a free press in a democracy. Obtaining and disclosing sensitive information when necessary in the public interest is a core part of the daily work of journalists. If that work is criminalized, our public discourse and our democracies are made significantly weaker. 12 years after the publication of Cablegate, it is time for the US government to end its prosecution of Julian Assange for publishing secrets. Publishing is not a crime. The editors and publishers of The New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, Der Spiegel, El País. And then it mentions a correction was made November 29th, the day after this was initially published. An earlier version of the letter misstated the date of Assange's arrest. It was April 11th, 2019, not April 12th. Okay. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Again, this was coming up on a year and a half ago. This was November of 2022 that this open letter from those 5 media organizations was published, urging the US government to stop its prosecution of Julian Assange and defending freedom of the press and the importance of continued freedom of the press. All right. So what I'll go ahead and move to next, and make sure that I've got my tabs in order here. I'm doing my best to keep my notes organized. The next thing that I want to look at is the role that Australia and the Australian government has played in defending Julian Assange over the last week. So let me go ahead and share this tab. This is a tab from Democracy Now!, which is an independent global news organization that I do tend to trust. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said during Prime Minister's questions on February 15th, so that's 5 days ago. This article is from February 15th, that's 5 days ago. So the Prime Minister of Australia, which is Assange's home country, this thing cannot just go on and on and on indefinitely. The Prime Minister was addressing an action he took a day earlier on Valentine's Day. No, not his marriage proposal to his partner, Jodie Hayton. She said yes. He was explaining his support for a parliamentary motion that passed overwhelmingly, calling for the release of an Australian citizen, imprisoned WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. So there was a parliamentary motion that did pass overwhelmingly, calling for his release, and now the Prime Minister is supporting that. Albanese's support builds on a growing demand from Australians across the political spectrum that the United Kingdom not extradite Assange to the United States, and for the US to drop its espionage and hacking charges against him. Assange, who has been imprisoned in London's notorious maximum security Belmarsh prison since 2019, has a court hearing in the UK. Assange's counsel, Jennifer Robinson, texted us on Thursday. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, Thursday was the 15th, right? Do some quick math. Monday, Sunday, Saturday, Friday, Thursday. Yeah, so this is from 5 days ago, the 15th, and that would be Thursday. The appeal next week, meaning this week, could be Julian's final appeal against U.S. extradition. If permission to appeal is denied, there are no further appeals available to us in the U.K. If extradited, Assange faces up to 175 years in prison in the United States, said Prime Minister Albanese. Enough is enough. Prior to his imprisonment in Belmarsh, Julian Assange spent several years cramped inside Ecuador's small London embassy, where he'd been granted political asylum. And there's here a little bit of information similar to what we've already read about Assange founded WikiLeaks, a website that publishes leaked material while protecting the identity of the whistleblowers. Launched in 2006, it wasn't until 2010 that the US government forcefully and publicly targeted WikiLeaks and Assange after WikiLeaks made several massive disclosures of leaked documents related to the US invasions and occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. And then here's another reference to that video, Collateral Murder, I was talking about. On Monday, April 5th, 2010, Julian Assange released a shocking video at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. The video, which WikiLeaks titled Collateral Murder, was shot in 2007 from a U.S. military Apache helicopter flying over Baghdad, Iraq. The video shows in grainy black and white detail the gunship's attack on a group of people on the ground. 12 civilians, including 2 Reuters news employees, were mowed down by automatic fire from the helicopter. The voices of the crew were recorded as they sought permission to engage with their targets, and as they laughed and cursed through the slaughter. It was a chilling video documenting a war crime. And for the record, nobody from the U.S. has been charged at the International Criminal Court for any of this that we're talking about right now. The video's release was followed by the publication on WikiLeaks.org of hundreds of thousands of digital records from the US military, dubbed the Iraq War Logs and the Afghan War Diary. These documents provided further proof that the US was committing war crimes. Some elected officials in the US called for Assange to be assassinated. Then Vice President Joe Biden called him a high-tech terrorist. Of course, if you happen to be watching this years into the future, at the time of this video, Joe Biden is president. Not long after, the U.S. Justice Department convened a secret grand jury which issued a sealed indictment against Assange. Existence of that indictment itself was revealed on WikiLeaks in a subsequent leak in 2012. U.S. and U.K. persecution of Assange since then has been continuous and severe. In 2017, as revealed in 2021 by journalist Michael Isikoff and colleagues, the CIA hatched plans to either kidnap Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy or even to assassinate him. Now, I'm aware that I'm going into a lot of different allegations and just, I can only cover so much in this one video. This certainly won't be the last time that I talk about this. I'm going to go ahead and finish the article and then give a few additional thoughts. Andrew Wilkie, an independent member of the Australian Parliament from Tasmania, introduced the resolution in support of Assange this week, saying, the House notes that on the 20th and 21st of February 2024, which is today and tomorrow, the High Court of Justice in the United Kingdom will hold a hearing into whether Walkley award-winning journalist Julian Assange can appeal his extradition to the United States of America. Both the Australian government and opposition have publicly stated that this matter has gone on for too long and underlines the importance of the UK and USA bringing the matter to a close so that Mr. Assange can return home to his family in Australia. The Australian government is not alone in calling for Assange's release. And then it goes into the letter that we just looked at, which is in November 2022, 5 major newspapers that collaborated with WikiLeaks, it names all of them again, released a joint letter calling for an end to the prosecution. And then we see a quote from it that we just read. I'll go ahead and read it again. Obtaining and disclosing sensitive information when necessary in the public interest is a core part of the daily work of journalists. If that work is criminalized, our public discourse and our democracies are made significantly weaker, the letter read. I'm definitely in agreement with that quote. I'm definitely in agreement that what Julian Assange exposed and published involved an exposure of war crimes committed by the U.S. government, which have never been prosecuted in an international criminal court. And instead, the U.S. is looking to extradite Julian Assange to have him serve the rest of his life in maximum security prison in the U.S. Assange's attorney, Jennifer Robinson, will be in the London court for the hearing. She told us, we have been saying for years, this is a political case which requires a political solution. The unprecedented showing of political support in the Australian Parliament overnight shows that Julian's case is a priority for the Australian government, our Parliament, and the people. The US should listen to the concerns of its ally and drop the case. And of course, Assange's attorney, Jennifer Robinson, was also quoted in the piece that I, she was quoted a little bit higher up here in the same article. My bad. All right. So I'll stop sharing that. And now we've looked at an overview of Julian Assange. We've looked at the letter that was written by journalists or by media companies calling for an end to his prosecution a year and a half ago. We've read what the Australian government has done in support of Julian Assange just in the last week. Now I want to go ahead and look at an article from today, published again by the New York Times. Again, one of those five sources that has that co-signed that letter calling for his support. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once again. Where is it? Yes, here it is. Beginning of the end, as Assange case returns to court. Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, has been in prison for nearly 5 years, fighting a U.S. extradition order. A hearing is his last chance to be granted an appeal in Britain. And right there, we're seeing a video of protesters who are outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London. You can bet that if I was living in London, I would definitely be there among the protesters. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so that I can look at part of what is included here. This is by Megan Specia, reporting from London. Again, this is from today, February 20th, 2024. According to this article, it was last updated 3:42 p.m. Eastern Time, which would have been a few hours ago. Since 2019, Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, has been held in a high-security prison in southeast London while his lawyers fight a U.S. extradition order. Now that particular battle may be nearing its end. On Tuesday, Mr. Assange's case returned to a British court for a 2-day hearing that will determine whether he has exhausted his right to appeal within the UK and whether he could be one step closer to being sent to the United States. Mr. Assange did not appear before the court, declining to attend virtually because of ill health, according to his lawyers, but dozens of protesters gathered outside, demanding his release. Power to those protesters, and I can't extend enough support and gratitude to those who are there and are able to stand up for him and bring additional attention to him. In the United States, Assange, 52, faces charges under the Espionage Act of 1917 that could amount to a sentence of up to 175 years in prison, his lawyers say. Although the lawyers for the United States government had previously said that he was more likely to be sentenced to between 4 and 6 years. I'm not sure how to best interpret that. Here's what to know about the long-running legal battle over his extradition and what could happen next. Assange has been in a British prison for nearly 5 years. Here's why. Goes into some of the same details again. What I want to do for a sec, because I don't need to read every individual piece of information. I've got all of the links that I am looking at linked in the description, and this is definitely something that's going to continue to be updated, and that I will continue to see more articles coming out about today and tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and skip down to this part of the article, though. All right. In April 2019, he was thrown out of the embassy, and that's referring to the London embassy in Ecuador, if I'm not mistaken, is what they said. Yeah, Ecuadorian, might have mixed that up. Ecuadorian embassy in London. In April 2019, he was thrown out of the embassy where he had become an unwelcome guest and was promptly arrested for skipping bail. Weeks later, the U.S. Justice Department unsealed an indictment, which charged Mr. Assange with 18 counts of violating the Espionage Act by participating in a criminal hacking conspiracy and by encouraging hackers to steal secret material. And then here's the information that I was starting to talk about earlier involving Chelsea Manning. Ms. Manning was later sentenced to 35 years in prison, but was released after 7 years when President Obama commuted her sentence. This hearing is the beginning of the end of extradition challenges in UK courts, Assange's team says. The extradition order for Mr. Assange was initially denied by a British judge who ruled in 2021 that Assange was at risk of suicide if sent to a US prison. Britain's High Court later reversed that decision after assurances from American officials about his treatment. Priti Patel, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Britain's then Home Secretary, approved the extradition request in 2022. But the legal challenges continued. Mr. Assange's legal team had an earlier request for an appeal to Ms. Patel's order, rejected by a single judge. Now, 2 High Court judges will hear his final bid for an appeal in a British court. Mr. Assange's legal team was expected to outline its case on Tuesday, followed by the U.S. Justice Department's legal team. The judges will then consider the case, which could take hours, days, or weeks before announcing their decision. Tuesday, of course, is referring to today, February 20th. And there are a few potential outcomes. The judges could allow Mr. Assange to appeal his extradition order, in which case a full appeal hearing would be scheduled, opening the door to a new decision about his extradition. Or, if Mr. Assange's request to appeal is denied, he could be sent swiftly to a plane bound for the United States, his legal team has said. But his lawyers have vowed to challenge his extradition in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, France. Theoretically, that could block his extradition from Britain until the case was heard in Strasbourg, because Britain is obliged to follow the court's judgment as a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. The process has taken its toll on Mr. Assange's health, and rights groups expressed fears about what comes next. Stella Assange, Mr. Assange's wife, said during a press briefing last week that her husband, who has been suffering from depression, has aged prematurely during his years in prison, and she fears for his mental and physical health. His life is at risk every single day he stays in prison, and if he's extradited, he will die. She said, the pair, who began a relationship while Mr. Assange lived in the Ecuadorian embassy, have 2 children, and they regularly visit Mr. Assange in prison. Julian and I protect the children. They don't know, frankly, Ms. Assange said about the indictment against him. And I don't think it's fair on them to know what is going on. And there's an image of her outside the Royal Courts of Justice on Tuesday, the picture from today. Alice Jill Edwards, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, I hope I pronounced that right, has urged Britain to halt Mr. Assange's extradition, citing fears that if extradited, he would be at risk of treatment amounting to torture or other forms of punishment. In a statement earlier this month, she pointed to risks that he could face prolonged solitary confinement despite his precarious mental health status and to receive a potentially disproportionate sentence. And then we also see another paragraph here about the Australian government, which has also called for Mr. Assange, an Australian citizen, to be sent to his home country, where its parliament passed a motion last week calling for his release. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said he had discussed the matter in a meeting last fall with President Biden, so referring to fall of 2023. And on Thursday, Mr. Albanese told the Australian Parliament it is appropriate for us to put out our very strong view that those countries need to take into account the need for this to be concluded. Rights groups like Amnesty International and advocates for press freedom, including Reporters Without Borders, have long called for the U.S. charges against Mr. Assange to be dropped and the extradition order canceled. Rebecca Vincent, the director of international campaigns for Reporters Without Borders, said in a statement ahead of the hearing that the U.S. could drop the extradition request or consider Mr. Assange's time in Belmarsh prison as time served. None of this is inevitable, Ms. Vincent said in a statement ahead of the hearing. No one should face such treatment for publishing information in the public interest. That's the end of the article. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And one more thing that I would like to take a look at is Stella Assange, who we just read a little bit about, his wife. She is really doing a lot to lead efforts to organize activists to speak out in support of Julian Assange. So I would like to share her site. So her site is stellaassange.com, and it says up here, it's titled Free Assange Emergency Toolkit. She's got information here about where gatherings are being held in London, as well as where she's live streaming the protests that are going on. And as I understand it, she's doing 24-hour live streams today and tomorrow. So her YouTube channel is also linked in the description. I encourage you guys to check that out. I encourage you to check out her website. And for those who just may be in general unfamiliar with Julian Assange, he's definitely a figure that I would encourage everybody to read into. I think that his story is very important on topics like freedom of speech and freedom of the press and the freedom of journalists to expose corruption within governments and within law enforcement agencies without fear of being prosecuted themselves. Now, I've shared, I know I just did a lot of reading, which was not necessarily what I was intending to do when getting into this and compiling research of things that I wanted to talk about on here. But the fact that all of this is happening this week at the same time that the LAPD is filing criminal charges against people who were protesting peacefully, against people who were attacked and attempted to let the police know that they were attacked and then ended up getting arrested themselves and are now putting out press releases. Oh, that's actually something that I intended to share at the beginning of this video and I didn't. So I know that I've got 2 separate topics that I'm kind of getting into in this video, and I contemplated doing a few different streams, and well, for better or worse, I'm covering a lot in this one stream, but bear with me. Thank you for everybody who is in here. I know I haven't been engaging with the chat as much in this stream. I will go back to look more at the chat and answer questions as best I can once I've covered a few more points that I want to cover. So I'll share my screen one more time. And some of you may have already seen the press release that the LAPD put out yesterday. So I'm going to share my screen again. And this is a tweet that was put out last night by LAPD PIO. As LAPD News, 3 arrested at scene of protest. This was tweeted. This was also tweeted by William Good, who's Streets LA, Jessica Palmadessa, and Aaron Smith Levin of Growing Up in Scientology also just did a video reacting to this. Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Police Department's Hollywood Patrol Division announces the arrest of 3 individuals following physical altercations at a protest in front of a restaurant. On February 16th, 2024, Hollywood officers initially met with 2 victims of a reported battery at Hollywood Station's front desk. The officers obtained signed private persons arrest statement forms, and around 10:30 p.m., the officers conducted a follow-up to the area of the 5900 block of Franklin Avenue, where they located and arrested 2 suspects. While officers were in the 5900 block of Franklin Avenue, effecting the first 2 arrests, they were alerted of a second physical altercation at the location. The officers detained the described suspect, met with the victim of battery, and provided the victim with a field show-up admonishment. The victim positively identified the detained individual as the suspect, and the suspect was arrested. The first 2 suspects, meaning the 2 who are identified in this paragraph right here, and it includes, that's referring to Danny and Cam. It includes their full names and booking numbers. The suspect arrested in the second incident was Scott Hochstetter. It includes his booking number, and of course that's Defender of Ants, aka DOA. All 3 suspects were booked for California Penal Section 182, conspiracy, and 22810, unlawful use of tear gas. The officers' investigation revealed that the battery crimes and the unlawful use of tear gas were committed by multiple suspects whose actions were planned, organized, and coordinated. The investigation included evidence that tear gas canisters, were distributed for purposeful use against others upon confronting and baiting them into physical altercations. So, again, I'm sorry that I did not share this at the beginning of the video as I intended to. But what we're seeing here is just another example of people who are protesting against abuse, people who are protesting against corruption, people who are attempting to make the public aware of the abuse and corruption that exists, and when they are the victims of attacks, as some of these individuals who are protesting on Friday night were, the LAPD turned around and arrested them and then released this statement defending their own actions by laying out that they're being charged with conspiracy, and that the officers' investigation revealed that the battery crimes and unlawful use of tear gas were committed by multiple suspects whose actions were planned, organized, and coordinated. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I've been doing my best to maintain my composure when talking about everything that's happened over the last few days involving DOA, Danny and Cam, involving the LAPD. I considered holding off on talking about Julian Assange until we had a little bit more clarity on when DOA was going to be released and when his court hearing was going to happen. But the reality is, I'm somebody who thinks that freedom of the press is important. I think freedom of speech is important. I think that reporters or activists, journalists, whatever term you want to use, people who take it upon themselves to expose corruption, to expose powerful institutions and powerful organizations that work to commit abusive acts and then cover up abusive acts and punish those who try to expose those abusive acts. I can't not cover Julian Assange. I think that what's happening this week is just too important for me to gloss over. The fact that the timing of these hearings that are happening in the United Kingdom regarding whether or not Julian Assange will be able to appeal his extradition to the United States, which may result in him spending the rest of his life in American prison, the fact that the timing of that corresponds with activists and protesters who I know personally being arrested by the LAPD for conspiracy and unlawful use of tear gas. It's certainly been weighing on me. This has definitely been it's been a wild week, to say the least. Oh, again, I've got links for Cam, Danny, and DOA for those of you who want to support them financially. DOA's court hearing is tomorrow. I did find out when calling to get more information about Josiah that his hearing will also be tomorrow. And a quick note about timing, because I know that this was another thing that there was some confusion about. For those who saw my live stream with Laura from last week, when we called to get information about the hearing, they did originally tell us it would be on Wednesday between 8:30 and 5. Now, between 8:30 and 5 is a very big time frame that could lead to us sitting around all day. Most recently, I've heard 8:30. Now, I was told that 8:30 a.m. would be the time of the hearings for DOA as well as for Josiah. Here's my experience with Here's my experience with hearings and time with the cases that I have attended. I have more experience attending hearings in civil court than in criminal court. But when I've attended hearings in civil court, what I've generally seen is that there will be a calendar posted outside of each individual courtroom that will show all of the cases that are on the calendar for a given time. So, for example, when I went to a hearing in the Leah Remini v. Scientology case a few weeks ago, her case was, I want to say it was number 9 or 10 on a list of several cases that were all scheduled for 8:30. So if you get there at 8:30, like I did, the court clerk will take attendance of the attorneys who are there. The judge will come out of their chambers and greet the attorneys again for each case, and then go through each case one at a time. So even if a case is on the calendar for 8:30, in my experience, that could mean that the judge won't actually start hearing that case until later. So I am going to plan to be at the courthouse at 8:30 tomorrow. I don't know if we can expect to hear an update shortly thereafter or if it'll take hours. But I wanted to clarify that because I know that there was confusion about, is it at 8:30 or is it between 8:30 and 5? The reality is that I don't know. I will plan to be there at 8:30 in case it does get underway soon. I'm also not holding my breath on that. So I just wanted to clarify that. One other thing that I looked into a little bit, that I tried to get some clarification about, still a bit confusing, has to do with use of pepper spray being classified as tear gas. It's something that I've done a handful of Google searches about to try to get clarification about. I'm not an attorney, and it can be tough to be able to interpret the law with confidence. But I want to share one source that I found that seems to be making sense to me. So I'll share my screen once again. And I want to share a source from hg.com. Excuse me, hg.org. So this is a legal article. Is pepper spray illegal in California? When may minors possess tear gas? What is the liability for misuse of pepper spray under California Penal Code Section 22810? And that's a penal code that we've definitely spoken a lot about over the last few days. In California, people may possess and use pepper spray and other tear gas weapons in self-defense. There are, however, restrictions regarding who may possess and use such, and even restrictions regarding the devices themselves. This highlighted part is really the main part that I want to focus on. Penal Code Section 22810 discusses both the right and the restrictions regarding tear gas weapons. Although Penal Code Section 22810 makes no reference to pepper spray, California courts have, for over 50 plus years, interpreted pepper spray to constitute a tear gas weapon. And it references the case People v. Otterson from 1968. Now, I haven't read all of the details of that case, People v. Otterson, But what I will say that I understand to be the case with the law in general is that cases over particular issues will set precedents. And um, when attorneys are making an argument or when a judge makes a ruling on a given issue, they will generally have to refer back to previous cases that have set a precedent on that issue or regarding that issue. So my understanding, based on what I'm reading from this article by hg.org, says that section or penal code section 22810, which prohibits the unlawful use and possession of tear gas, does not make any explicit reference to pepper spray, but California courts for 50 plus years have interpreted pepper spray to constitute a tear gas weapon, as set by a precedent in People v. Otterson. That's my best understanding of the legal distinction between pepper spray and tear gas at this time. If there are attorneys out there that have additional clarifications or anything to add on that subject, it's something that I'm just kind of starting to learn about. So it's certainly something that I'm open to more discussion about. Now, I've already been on for 52 minutes, so I actually did end up speaking for a little bit longer than I meant to, and I haven't engaged with the chat yet. I would like to get to some of the stuff in the chat before I hop on live with Natalie Webster and Laura FM, which again is scheduled for 4:30. So I apologize if I'm not able to get to all of the chat, but I'm gonna look through quickly and see if there are some questions that I can answer. But really, the main points that I wanted to get across here: freedom of the press is important. Freedom of speech is important. The freedom of journalists, activists, reporters to be allowed to publish their opinions or facts. Either or. I know my thoughts are a little bit all over the place, as it has been a wild few weeks. But the right of activists and journalists to publish information and publish their opinions on it needs to be protected. And I really think that the Julian Assange case is an important case to pay attention to when speaking about that issue. And I think that everything that we're seeing happen with DOA, Danny, Cam, all of the protesters who have been involved in physical altercations and negative encounters with LAPD, I think all of it should be talked about. All right. Miss Sunrise Dawn, Laura or Jacob, what time is the interview with Natalie? I have to set the font on my phone so big that it often pushes the time off the screen. That'll be 4:30 Pacific Standard Time, so in a little bit less than an hour. All right. Crystal says, if they bring Assange here and they actually prosecute him for journalism, our freedom of press will never recover from that precedent. I 100% understand why Jacob is bringing this up. Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. All right. I apologize for the dead airtime. I'm looking to quickly scroll through the chat and do my best to check out the questions that people may have that I think are important. By the way, I don't know if Mandy Moore was able to stick around for this one, but huge thank you to her for being a moderator. Now that this channel is starting to grow, I could use some more help from moderators. If you are interested in being a moderator on my channel, feel free to send me an email at jacobaharkey@gmail.com. I know that in some previous lives by Danny and Leah that I was watching yesterday, some folks tend to have mod sprees where they will make lots of folks in the chat moderators all at once. I'm not looking to do that, but if you are interested in being a moderator, feel free to reach out to me because I could definitely use the help. Tampa B Man says Jacob stopped by to say hi. Hi, Tampa B Man. Thank you for popping in here. I appreciate it. Amy M says Assange wasn't in good health to begin with, having been in the embassy without sunlight. Yes, that's one thing about any form of solitary confinement or imprisonment without access to a yard. That deprivation of sunlight can really be taxing on mental and physical health, regardless of what a person is charged with. Completely depriving them of sunlight. Gosh, prison reform is a whole a whole other can of worms that I could get into at some point. Cap Pavitt says, I'll never forget that video. Horrifying. I'm assuming that you're referring to Collateral murder, which, oh gosh. Yeah, I didn't want to show it on here, partly because of time and partly because of content, but yes. Missy B and Seth D says, if anyone has issues with any individual protester, follow a different one. That's how we know they're all individuals, protesting for individual reasons. There are dozens doing their own thing. I really appreciate this comment because at the end of the day, all of us who are out there, we're individuals. And yes, a lot of us share a common goal, and a lot of us are friends outside of protesting. But particularly following folks being criminally charged with conspiracy and press releases coming from the LAPD stating that these were premeditated or organized, coordinated attacks. I really don't appreciate the way that the LAPD has characterized some of the protesters' acts on Friday night. And I do appreciate the those of you out there who are backing the protesters and pointing out these are individuals. You know, honestly, one thing that I've been thinking about, the Squirrel Squad is just another term like SPTV. SPTV, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, it's not a real organization. It's an informal collection of YouTube channels. A handful of channels will use the SPTV logo, but it doesn't mean that they all report back to some boss. There is no leader of SPTV. It's just a label that a handful of YouTube channels who are made up of suppressive persons who are exposing Scientology have decided to use. Same thing with the Squirrel Squad. There is no leader in the Squirrel Squad. There is no membership forms or applications, anything like that for the Squirrel Squad. We're individuals. So thank you, Missy B and Seth D for the comment. I appreciate it. Yeah, Amy M says Assange had so much to bring down everyone on both sides of the aisle. I think that there's some truth there, and I think that that's why why the United States would like to extradite him and have him serve out the rest of his life here. Sparkle Me Silly says support DOA, Danny, and LA Cam. Yes, please do. And again, their links are all in the description of this video for those who want to support them financially. I'm sure that they would really appreciate it. Cheshire Cat says, Jacob, so happy Natalie Webster will be interviewing you this afternoon. You are providing such solid reporting. Thank you, Cheshire Cat. I appreciate it. Amy M says, the NBC News report reminded me why I don't watch TV news. Honestly, that's another thing. That's another thing that I feel like fits into all of this. Seeing the way that mainstream media handles certain issues versus the way that independent journalists and activists will handle the same issues. Seeing the way that tensions will grow between activists who are standing up for what's right and law enforcement who tends more regularly to back corrupt institutions. Totally. Thank you for your comment. DM, Julian Assange is a hero, but of course the US government did not see it that way. Yep. Spicy Cat Foster says, anyone else missing every fifth word? Come on, YouTube. I hope that my connection is okay. I know that yesterday when I viewed back some of the stream that I did outside the jail, I may not have had great internet connection. I know it cut in and out at some points, which is disappointing. But I hope you all have been able to understand me to some extent. I apologize if the connection has not been great. DM says there are so many bigger problems in this world. Why are they concerned about Julian Assange? People need to ask themselves that. I'm assuming that you're talking about the U.S. government in here when you say why are they concerned about Julian Assange. I hope that's what you mean. That's what I think you mean. Hmm. Lily says solitary confinement is beyond cruel. Yes. Yeah, Presumidal says while the West condemns Navalny's death in Russia, they like to look away from Assange. I could not agree with you more. And Alexei Navalny was a prisoner in Russia who died in the last week or so in prison. Honestly, there's a lot more to get into on the subject of Alexei Navalny. Gosh, sometimes it can be hard to adequately cover everything I want to say on certain topics in one concise video. But I agree with what you're saying here. Maybe more to say about Alexei Navalny another time. But thank you very much for the comment. All right, I see that I'm still about 20 minutes behind on the chat, so I think I'll just go for another few minutes here because I also want to be prepared for a 4:30 interview with Natalie and Laura. Rapunzel says hashtag free Assange. Yes, I love it. Oh, yes. Thank you, Ellie, for pointing this out. Funny, NBC insisted only one protester was arrested, but LAPD press release admitted 3 were arrested. NBC, where is your retraction? That's a great question. Great question. I would love to see NBC do a follow-up report. Oh, gosh. Although another part of me is like, well, will they just back the LAPD again and include the LAPD's statement without talking to more protesters? I don't know. Molly King says, I'm happy you covered Julian Assange. He definitely needs coverage in his freedom. I agree. And thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. Yeah, Lorraine W says, yes, they could get their reports immediately, but Mindy just gets the runaround, Jessica gets assaulted and waits hours, and Chris gets assaulted and no one around. This is all true. All true. Yeah, there are more than one instances, multiple instances now of protesters protesting against Scientology and against La Poubelle being attacked and struggling to get any real form of justice. While, meanwhile, it didn't take long at all for the folks who were assaulting protesters to get what they were looking for. All right, a few more minutes. Let me see. Janice Robinson says, hi, Jacob. Do you think the conspiracy charges for Cam, Danny, and DOA come from the video that was made when Cam and Chris was spraying the pepper spray at the tree outside outside the poo bar? Keep protesting. I will keep protesting. So growing up in Scientology, that's Aaron Smith Levin. He did a video earlier today that, if I'm not mistaken, I think I linked in the description of this video, where he specifically shows the exact portions of each video that show these specific incidents that are being discussed in the LAPD press release. So I would encourage you to check that out. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to check out Growing Up in Scientology's YouTube channel and look at the video that he posted today. What was the title of it? I can't recall the title of it off the top of my head, but you'll find it. It has to do with the protesters being charged with criminal conspiracy, and you'll be able to see exactly which part of each incident was correlated to which charge. Yeah, DM, right, is clearly on video and right before our eyes, and they will still lie about it, and that is so damn scary. So one thing that's interesting here is I actually don't even know Uh, if you're talking about the LAPD or if you're talking about Julian Assange, the reality is could be either. I think you're talking about the LAPD press release here. But yes, thank you for the comment. Jose says Jacob would be a great lawyer. Thank you, Jose. You know, I took the LSAT in the fall, and I'm looking to take it again later this year so that I can maybe law school. It is definitely something that I'm interested in. I'm interested in a few different things because I'm interested in law. I'm interested in journalism. I'm interested in continuing to do more activism. Although typically activism is, well, it's not typically it's not a very typical career path. But I mean, hey, I really appreciate this, and who knows? Maybe one day. Solda at 001 says, Mr. Harkey, with some nice emojis there. That is what my students call me. It's nice to see somebody calling me that in the chat. Lorraine W says, Jacob, you only have to look at the Online Safety Act in England to know which way things are going. We even have thought crimes here. I will have to check that out because I don't think that I'm as familiar with that, the Online Safety Act. But I don't doubt what you're saying. I don't doubt that it's, well, I'll look into it. I'll look into it. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Woody Woo says, can DOA get his van out for free when this turns out he never should have been arrested? Good question. Because again, his van is another issue that we've received a couple of different pieces of information about. Initially, Laura and I were told that it was being held as evidence and that the police had a warrant to search it. Then, when I called the lot yesterday, it sounded like, no, it's ready to be picked up and he's going to owe some money. If I'm not mistaken, what I said yesterday in the video is that yesterday the total cost of impoundment was up to $497 with an additional $55 per day. And of course, at the time that I streamed yesterday, I was thinking that his hearing was today. So he would have another $55 added for a total of $552. Well, now, if his hearing is actually going to be tomorrow, I'm really hoping that he will be released tomorrow and able to get his van. And so 552 plus another 55, what does that come up to? $607, I think. So again, his links are in the description as well as Danny's and Cam's. If you want to support any of them, I strongly encourage you to do that. Bliss Rose said, are hearings allowed to be live streamed? Not without approval from the judge. I'm not expecting that we will be able to bring cameras into the court tomorrow. This is something that I actually would like to get some more practice with doing, is applying for a media press pass, because in the past when I've attended hearings, I've just gone as a member of the public. I haven't gone with a media press pass. For example, and it depends from case to case. Different judges might make different rulings in different cases. Excuse me. For example, in the Danny Masterson criminal trial, cameras were not allowed in the courtroom, and Judge Olmedo made that decision because of the nature of the case, because it had to do with violent sexual assault. Meanwhile, in the Leah Remini v. Scientology case, which is about the fair game that Leah has received from Scientology, there is a camera allowed in the courtroom. And it's only one, if I'm not mistaken, it's ABC7 that is taping those hearings. But the judge did allow that, and others are not allowed. So in other words, I can't be in the back row filming on my phone. That's not allowed. But there is a camera person in there from ABC7 who has received permission from the judge to film in there. I'm not expecting tomorrow's hearings to be filmed. But good question. Thank you for the question. Brenda says, thank you, Jacob, for your honest reporting. No, it's hard when you personally know the people and are friendly with them. It is scary times with how corrupt LAPD are. Yeah, thank you, Brenda. I appreciate you. Spicy Cat Foster says, anyone else losing sleep over these kids? I really appreciate everyone's concern. My goal is definitely not for folks to be losing sleep. My goal is not to fearmonger by doing these videos and sharing updates as I feel is necessary. I appreciate your concern, though. Thank you for your concern, and thank you to everybody who's tuning into these. I really appreciate it. Colin Brenner says, sadly, you will probably have a long day waiting in court. I am mentally preparing for that. I plan to be there at 8:30, but I'm fully aware that it could be a while before we actually end up getting out of there. Molly King says, question, Jacob, I'm new to your channel. How did you get into all this? What brought you into the fight against Scientology? For me, it really started in fall of 2020 when Leah Remini's Scientology in the Aftermath was put on Netflix. I watched every episode of the show. I started reading books by ex-Scientologists like Mark Headley and Leah Remini, Jenna Miscavige, and the more that I learned, the more infuriated I became. I was interested by everything that I was reading and thought it was an interesting topic, but at the same time, it was infuriating to realize what the organization is able to get away with. And beyond that, since I've started hearing about protests which have been organized near me, like the Eat Predators protests that were organized by Alexa Nicholas in September and October, those are where I got to meet people like Serge and Laura. And now that I actually know people who have been personally affected by Scientology, I just can't stop paying attention. I can't stop caring about all this. All right, it's 3:56. I'm going to plan to get off of here at 4 o'clock. So I'll try to get a few comments for a few more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up for this piece. Omni, Jacob looks like Clark Kent. I've been getting that a lot over the last few days, and thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Lorraine W says, I'll Instagram you. I'll look out for a DM. Yeah, thank you. I am Jacob A. Harkey on Instagram. If anybody wants to reach me there, I'll double check my message requests. I did see that there were some that came in yesterday that I didn't get because they were from people that I didn't follow at that point. But feel free, if you want to contact me, that's a place that you can feel free to reach me. Okay, I'm seeing somebody who needs to be banned from the chat. Again, my apologies that I didn't have a mod available in this one. But like I said, if you're interested in modding, feel free to send me an email at jacobaharkey@gmail.com. I'd really appreciate the help if you would like to. Fat Cat's Heaven says, are you familiar with Dodge Landisman? He was a reporter that Scientology got fired. I am. I have not met him in person, but yes, I have seen some of the videos that he's done after hearings when he's chatted with Aaron, and yes, I admire him a lot. Thank you for bringing him up. Yeah, I'm seeing some comments responding to the troll and pointing out that I needed to block him. My apologies for. Oh my gosh, another one. All right. Well, I'm seeing why it's necessary to have mods. My apologies for how long that took for me to get to that. And I see Are You Jellin is saying Jacob, Natalie is live now. Yes, I'm aware. She told me that she had another live stream that was going to be 3:30. 3:30, and then we're going live at 4:30. So I'll plan to join her link shortly before we get started, and I will see you guys soon. Really? My gosh. Sorry. I'm seeing more trolls. More people to delete. My gosh. So many trolls. Okay. Speedy's Black Sun. Wow, is this a racist channel? Absolutely not. I really apologize for all of the trolls who are posting racial slurs in the chat. I'm doing what I can to go through and block them now. And again, my apologies that this did not happen sooner. I'm seeing that as this channel has grown, I'm so glad to see how much this channel has grown and how many of you there are that are paying attention to what I'm doing here. But yeah, I'm really sorry about all the trolls in here. My bad. Crystal says, "Yo, mod me, Jacob. Major trolls here. So I'm currently streaming on StreamYard. Once I hop over to the YouTube I can't make you a mod directly from StreamYard, but I'll make a note that you're interested. And if you could send me an email too to remind me, because it is now 4:00, so I'm running a little short on time before I'll hop on the other channel. But yes, I would love it if you could help me out if you would like to. That would be awesome." Dustin Fountain says, "I would love to be a mod. I'll send an email. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dustin." Love Stokely says, "Jacob, can you put the chat on subscribers only? It looks like I do need to do that. So thank you." All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the mods ended up becoming, or excuse me, that the trolls ended up becoming such a major topic in the mods. But I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you who are stepping up and offering to help out. That is definitely much appreciated. All right, it looks like I'm almost caught up to the end here. So where does Jacob keep his cape and tights? I'm assuming that followed the Clark Kent comment. No cape and tights yet, but I I appreciate the comment. Thank you. Yeah, Jacob, can you provide your email for us? jacobaharkey@gmail.com. Kara Feeble says, "I'll mod for you, Jacob. I mod for Sergio, and he's semi-retired. We're friends on TikTok. Thank you. Thank you so much. If you could send me an email as well, that would be really awesome." All right. It looks like I'm just about caught up to the end of the stream here. And so I will go ahead and wrap this up so that I can get ready for my next stream. Again, that'll be at 4:30, so 28 minutes from now. And I'll be chatting with Natalie Webster and Laura FM. If you're available to make it into that one, I would love to see you there. And in the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Thank you to those of you who tuned in. Thank you for engaging in this with me. And I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.